Night fell over Chicago like a thick black curtain. Snow drifted down in a light, restless sprinkle, laying a thin white film over the sidewalk at a street corner near the business district. The streetlights flickered, casting their wavering glow onto the lonely figure of a woman huddled beside a bucket of wilted flowers. Sarah Mitchell, 28 years old, wore a thin coat, worn through and torn at the shoulder. Her dark brown hair was tied back in a rushed knot, loose strands falling across a face that looked pale and drawn. Beneath her eyes lay deep, heavy shadows, the kind left by someone who no longer remembers what a good night's sleep feels like. Her lips had turned purplish from the cold, yet she still stood there, hands reddened and numb, holding the few remaining bouquets. A few yards away, inside an old car parked tight against the curb, 5-year-old Lucas sat curled beneath a thin blanket. His skin was ashen, his lips faintly blue, not from the cold, but from the congenital heart condition that was slowly, day by day, draining the life from him. In his small hands was a stub of colored pencil and a half-finished drawing, a picture of his mother holding flowers under falling snow. Sarah stood in silence. She had not eaten all day, the last piece of bread she had saved for Lucas. Her mouth trembled, but she clenched her jaw, forcing herself to stay upright. Lucas noticed. Slowly, the little boy opened the car door and stepped down onto the street, in shoes worn open at the toes. He walked toward his mother, clutching an old scarf, the one thing that kept him warm through nights spent sleeping in the car. He stopped in front of Sarah, looked up at her with wide eyes, and gently looped the scarf around her neck. "Mom, you are colder than I am," Lucas whispered, his voice roughened by the wind. "I have a blanket in the car already." Sarah tried to smile, but the corners of her eyes had already blurred with tears. "Go back to the car, sweetheart. It's so cold out here." Lucas shook his head. He took her hand and held it tight. "I am not afraid of the cold, Mom," he said, his voice trembling, but his eyes steady. "I'm only afraid you will collapse and not get back up again." Sarah froze. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mingling with snowflakes as they melted. An elderly woman passing by stopped, lifting a hand to cover her mouth. Her eyes filled. A young woman waiting at the bus stop hurriedly turned her face away, her shoulders quivering. At that same moment, a line of black vehicles appeared. 3 gleaming SUVs rolled to a stop at a red light, less than 10 yards from the corner. The middle car had windows so dark you could see nothing inside. Vincent Romano, 37 years old, sat in the back seat. A black overcoat lay over a tailored suit, and a faint scar at his neck hid beneath his collar. He was listening to a report on the phone, his voice cold as steel. "Caruso stepped onto my territory again. Tell him to get a coffin ready." His hand reached for a glass of whiskey, and his eyes swept, almost absent-mindedly, toward the window. He stopped. A gaunt woman selling flowers in a snowy night. A small child placing a scarf around his mother. The image struck him like a blade driven straight into his chest. Emma had done the same. His little girl had pulled a blanket over him when he fell asleep slumped at his desk. She had once said, "Dad, you are colder than I am." The whiskey in his hand tilted, unsteady. "Boss?" Daniel Cole, his bodyguard, looked at him with concern. "It's green." Vincent did not answer. His gaze stayed locked on the corner. That boy was looking up at his mother with eyes that held no fear. The eyes of a child who had already chosen to be strong for the one he loved. The boy's words echoed in Vincent's mind, though he could not actually hear them. "I am only afraid you will collapse and not get back up again." Vincent set the glass down. "Stop the car." Daniel startled. "Boss, this is neutral ground. It's not SAF." I said, "Stop the car." The convoy halted. A door opened. Vincent stepped out. The wind snapped at the tails of his black coat. His polished leather shoes pressed into the thin layer of snow, each step slow, deliberate, weighted with intent. People on the sidewalk quickly moved away. Everyone knew who those black vehicles belonged to. Everyone knew you did not stare for too long. But Vincent did not care. He walked straight toward the corner. Sarah lifted her head and saw a tall figure approaching. Instinct surged through her. She pulled Lucas behind her and stepped forward, shielding him with her body. "I do not sell anything but flowers," she said, her voice shaking, but her eyes refusing to drop. "Please go." Vincent stopped a few steps away. He did not look at Sarah. He looked at Lucas. The boy peeked out from behind his mother and met Vincent's gaze. No fear, no pleading, only the clear curiosity of a child who did not yet know who this man was. "Who are you buying flowers for?" Lucas asked, tilting his head. "My mom has really pretty flowers." Vincent felt as if someone had driven a fist into his chest. He did not answer. He simply stood there, staring at the boy with an expression even he did not understand. Then Lucas asked again, his voice small as wind. "Do you have a kid, sir?" Vincent went still. "I am asking because you look at me the way my dad used to look at me, back when he was still here, before he left." The wind swept through. The snow began to fall heavier. Vincent slowly lowered himself to a crouch, level with the boy's eyes. The cold gray eyes that had always been ice, for the first time held something that shifted, something that trembled at the edges. "I did," he rasped. "A daughter. Where is she now?" Silence. The wind moaned through the narrow gaps between buildings. "She went very far away." Lucas nodded slowly, as if he understood what adults could not bring themselves to say. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I think she must miss you a lot." Vincent did not reply. He stood, stepped closer to the bucket of flowers, and pulled out his wallet. He took all the cash inside and placed it into the bucket. Sarah stared at the money. Her hands began to shake. "Sir, you have made a mistake. I do not need charity." Vincent looked at her, his gaze deep and unreadable. "I am not giving charity. I am buying all your flowers." He said nothing more. He turned and walked back toward the convoy, but when the car door opened, he stopped. He looked back once more. A frail woman holding her son tightly. A child pulling the scarf back around his mother's neck. A picture too familiar, too painful. Vincent stood there a moment longer. Then instead of getting into the vehicle, he turned around. He walked back toward them, slowly, each step heavy, as if he carried his entire past on his shoulders. He stopped in front of the old car where Lucas slept. Sarah tensed again, ready to protect her child. But Vincent only looked at her, then at the boy, then at the battered car. Without a word, he slipped off his expensive black coat and laid it across the top of the car. Then he sat down on the cold curb of the sidewalk, leaning his back against the brick wall of a closed storefront, right beside their battered car. Sarah stared at him, confused, uncertain. "What are you doing?" Vincent did not answer. He simply sat there in silence, in the snow, in the Chicago night. Daniel stood by the SUV, eyes wide. In 10 years with Vincent Romano, he had never seen his boss do anything like this. Lucas looked out from the car door and saw the strange man sitting beside his mother. The boy smiled, the first smile in many days. "Mom," he whispered. "He is not scary. His eyes are very sad." Sarah looked at her son, then at the unfamiliar man sitting in the cold snow. She did not know who he was. She did not know what he had done. She only knew that tonight, for the first time in a long time, someone had chosen to sit down beside them instead of walking away. If this story touched your heart, please tap like to support the channel. Share it with those who need to be reminded that miracles sometimes begin with simply sitting down, and do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next stories. The weak winter morning sun slipped through the car window, glazed with frost, and stirred Sarah awake from a fitful, broken sleep. She blinked a few times, her body aching from being curled up all night in the driver's seat. Lucas was still tucked into a tight little ball in the back. The thin blanket pulled over his head, his breathing steady, sending faint white clouds into the bitter air. Sarah sat up and rubbed her numb hands together, trying to piece together what had happened the night before. The strange man in the black suit, the sleek convoy, those deep gray eyes, heavy with a quiet sorrow, and the way he had sat down beside them in the falling snow, without saying a word. For a moment, she thought it must have been a dream. But when she looked through the glass, her heart caught. On the roof of the car, the black coat was still there. A light layer of last night's snow had settled over it, but the expensive fabric still gleamed under the early light. Sarah opened the door and stepped out, the cold biting like needles through her thin clothes. She lifted the coat, startled by its weight and softness. It was not something people like her ever got to touch, let alone own. Her fingers brushed the inner pocket and felt something hard. She pulled it out, a black business card with raised silver lettering. No name, no title, only a string of phone numbers. Sarah turned the card over and over, searching for something else. But there was nothing. Who was that man? Why had he left this behind? She did not understand, and the things she did not understand usually frightened her. Then she remembered the bucket of flowers. She hurried to the corner where she had stood selling them the night before. The old plastic bucket was still there, pushed sideways by the wind. Inside, the flowers had drooped and withered in the cold. But what made Sarah's legs give out was not the flowers. Money. So much money. Crisp $100 bills stacked together, damp under a dusting of snow, but still intact. Sarah sank to her knees, trembling as she gathered the bills and counted them one by one. 100, 200, 500, 1,000, 2,000. She counted again, then 3 times in all, not daring to trust her own eyes. $3,200. Enough to rent a warm motel room for 2 weeks. Enough to buy Lucas's medicine. Enough so they would not have to sleep in the car through another night of brutal winter. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time they were not tears of despair. She went back to the car, pressing the stack of money against her chest. Lucas had woken up. His big eyes watched her through the window. "Mom, you are crying again," he said, his voice tight with worry. Sarah opened the door, slid in beside him, and pulled him into her arms. "No, sweetheart. This time I'm crying because I am happy." Lucas tilted his head, confused. Then his gaze landed on the black coat in his mother's hands. "It's the sad flower man's coat," he burst out. "Did he give you his coat?" Sarah looked at her son, then at the coat. The sad flower man. The name Lucas had given the stranger last night. She did not know why, but the name made something warm stir inside her. "I do not know, baby. Maybe he forgot it." "He did not forget," Lucas said with certainty. "He left it for you, because he saw you were cold." Sarah fell quiet. She looked down at the business card in her hand, then at the money, then at the coat. A complete stranger, one chance encounter in the night, and an act she could not explain. She should return it. She should find him and give everything back. She did not take charity. She did not owe anyone anything. But then Lucas coughed, a dry, deep sound from his small chest. His lips tinged faintly blue, his skin paler than usual, and Sarah understood she did not have the right to refuse. Not for herself, for Lucas. She folded the business card carefully and tucked it into her pocket. Then she draped the black coat over Lucas's shoulders, wrapping him in a warmth that still carried a trace of men's cologne. "Today we are going to find a new place to stay. All right," she said softly. Lucas smiled, a rare smile that made Sarah's heart melt. "The sad flower man is really good, right, Mom?" Sarah did not answer. She only stared out through the window, where the snow had stopped and the sky was slowly, gently brightening. She did not know who that man was. She did not know why he had helped them, and she did not know whether they would ever see him again. But this morning, for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to hope. The black convoy glided smoothly through the quiet streets of Chicago at dawn, cutting past a wealthy suburb where mansions hid behind tall, wrought iron fences. Vincent sat in silence in the back seat, eyes turned toward the window, yet seeing nothing at all. His mind was still holding on to last night's image, a small boy with clear, fearless eyes placing a scarf around his mother in the freezing snow, and the sentence that had made Vincent's heart feel as though a hand had closed around it and squeezed. "I am only afraid you will collapse and not get back up again." Daniel glanced at his boss in the rearview mirror, silent, not daring to ask. In 10 years as a bodyguard, he had never seen Vincent Romano behave the way he did last night. Sitting down on a sidewalk in the middle of a snowy night beside a stranger and her little child, leaving his coat behind, leaving money behind, then walking away without a word. That was not the Vincent Romano Daniel knew. Vincent Romano never stopped for anyone. The iron gate opened, and the convoy rolled slowly onto the estate grounds. Warm yellow light spilled from large windows, reflecting off the white snow that blanketed the garden. Vincent stepped out of the car and went straight inside without waiting for anyone to open the door for him. His footsteps echoed on the cold marble floor, past a vast living room filled with expensive paintings, up the spiral staircase that led to the second floor. He stopped before an oak door at the end of the hallway. His hand touched the knob. He hesitated for a brief moment, then pushed the door open and walked in. The room was the same as it had been 3 years ago. A small bed dressed in pale pink sheets, a bookshelf packed with fairy tales, a teddy bear lying on its side against the pillow, and on the nightstand, a silver frame holding the photo of a little girl with a bright smile and gray eyes just like his. Emma. Vincent sat on the edge of the bed, his hands trembling as he lifted the frame. In this picture, she was only 6 years old, taken on her last birthday before everything collapsed. Frosting smeared on her cheek, candlelight glittering in her eyes, and the radiant smile of a child who did not know she would not live long enough to blow out another set of candles ever again. He remembered that night, the night he received the call from Grace while he was in New York, nearly 1,000 miles from Chicago. His wife's sobs choked the phone line, hospital machines shrieking somewhere behind her, and the words he would never forget. "She is gone, Vincent. Our daughter is gone." He flew back that same night. But when he arrived, Emma was already lying still on the hospital bed, eyes closed, her small lips turned blue. He gathered her into his arms and kept calling her name, over and over. But she did not answer. She would never answer again. Grace blamed him. She said he had chosen work over family. She said he had abandoned them. She said if he had been there, maybe Emma would have fought harder, and Vincent could not argue, because deep down, he believed it too. 6 months later, Grace took her own life. She left a short letter on the table. I am going to find our child. I cannot forgive you, and I cannot forgive myself. Vincent set Emma's picture back down, then looked at another frame on the shelf. Grace on their wedding day, glowing in a white dress, her eyes full of happiness and hope. The two women he had loved most in this world. Both of them had left him, and he had become the kind of monster the underworld called Vincent Romano, cold, ruthless, never forgiving, never forgetting. Because if he stopped building walls around himself, the pain would swallow him whole. But last night, that little boy had done what no one had been able to do in 3 years. The boy had made him remember who he used to be. A father. Vincent rose, stepped out of the room, and closed the door behind him. He went down the stairs, where Daniel was waiting in the living room. Daniel. Yes, boss. The mother and child from that street corner last night. Find out about them. Everything. Daniel looked surprised, but he did not question it. He only nodded. Yes, boss. I will have a report within 24 hours. Vincent turned away and looked out the tall window as dawn slowly broke along the Chicago horizon. Faster, he said, his voice low. I want to know today. That afternoon, Daniel knocked and stepped into Vincent's office with a thick file folder in his hands. The room was vast, lined with bookshelves that rose all the way to the ceiling, a glossy black walnut desk at its center, and a wall of glass that looked out onto a garden buried under clean, white snow. Vincent sat behind the desk, eyes fixed on nothing at all. The cup of coffee in front of him had gone cold long ago. Boss, I have the information. Vincent did not turn around. He only gave a slight nod, a quiet signal for Daniel to continue. The bodyguard opened the file and began to read, his voice steady, clear, almost clinical. Sarah Mitchell, 28 years old. Born and raised in Chicago. Graduated from nursing school with excellent marks. Worked at St. Mary's Hospital for 4 years. Highly regarded by colleagues and patients. She received multiple commendations for her dedication. Vincent stayed silent, but his eyes sharpened, as if he were catching every detail. 6 years ago, she was accused of stealing pain medication from the hospital pharmacy. She was fired immediately, her license was revoked, and she was blacklisted in the medical field. No one would hire her after that. Daniel turned to the next page, his voice dropping just slightly. Her husband, Kevin Brooks, filed for divorce right after the scandal broke. He took all their shared savings, about $50,000, and disappeared. At the time, Sarah was 4 months pregnant. Vincent's hand tightened into a fist on the desktop, but he still said nothing. She gave birth alone, with no one beside her. The child's name is Lucas Mitchell, currently 5 years old. He was diagnosed with a congenital heart condition at birth and needs surgery with an estimated cost of about $200,000. No insurance, no family support. Daniel paused for a moment, as if weighing whether he should keep going. At present, Sarah and Lucas live in an old car she managed to buy with what little she saved. During the day, she works as a cleaner in an office building. At night, she sells flowers on a street corner. Her monthly income is not enough to rent even a small room, let alone cover hospital bills for her son. Vincent turned slowly. His gray eyes darkened, like a sky-gathering storm. She stole medication. Daniel shook his head, firm. I looked deeper, boss. There is no solid evidence. The matter was handled internally. It never went to court. The person who reported her was Dr. Richard Hayes, head of the emergency department at St. Mary's. After Sarah was fired, he was promoted and received a large bonus. Vincent's brow tightened. Hayes. That name sounds familiar. Yes, boss. He has connections to certain figures in the underworld. I am still digging. Vincent rose and walked to the window, staring out at the snow-covered garden. In his mind, the image returned of the gaunt woman from last night. The fierce steadiness in her eyes, even with despair sitting heavy beneath it. The way she had stepped in front of her son, shielding him like the last soldier in a battle already lost. She was not a criminal. She was a victim. Any criminal record? Vincent asked, voice low. Nothing, boss. Completely clean. No debts. No ties to any organization. Just a mother trying to keep her son alive. Vincent said nothing for a long time. Lucas's face came back to him, the scarf being placed around his mother's neck in the falling snow. The boy's clear eyes when he asked, "Do you have a kid, sir?" And the words that cracked something open inside Vincent. I think she must miss you a lot. Emma had eyes like that too. Innocent, brave, older than her years. Daniel. Yes, boss. Keep watching them. Report every move to me. Daniel nodded, but before he left, he hesitated. Boss, can I ask one question? Vincent did not turn, but his silence was permission. What are you going to do with them? Vincent did not answer right away. He only kept looking out the window, where snow had begun to fall again, laying a fresh white layer over the city. I do not know yet, he said very softly, but this time, I am not walking away. 3 days after that fateful night, Sarah was mopping the floor on the 12th level of an office building when the phone in her pocket began to vibrate. She glanced at the screen and saw the number for the preschool Lucas attended for free through a program that helped children from low-income families. Her heart tightened as she answered. Miss Mitchell? Lucas fainted on the playground. We called an ambulance. Please come to Chicago Children's Hospital right away. Sarah did not even make it to the end of the sentence. She threw the mop down and bolted for the stairwell, not waiting for the elevator. She was still in her light blue cleaning uniform, rubber gloves still on her hands, but she did not care. She only knew she had to run. She ran out to the street, ran to the bus stop, then ran on foot when the bus moved too slowly. Her lungs felt as if they might burst, her legs burning, but the image of Lucas lying motionless on the playground kept spinning through her mind, driving her forward. 20 minutes later, Sarah burst into the emergency department at Chicago Children's Hospital, hair wild, face flushed from sprinting, breath coming in broken gulps. My son, Lucas Mitchell, 5 years old. They just brought him in. The triage nurse looked at her with sympathy and led her to a room at the end of the hall. Lucas lay on the bed with his eyes closed, his small face pale as paper. An IV line was taped to his thin arm. A heart monitor beside him beeped in steady, measured rhythm. Sarah rushed to his side, seized his ice-cold hand, and tears poured down her cheeks before she could stop them. Lucas, it's Mom. I am here. Sweetheart, I am here. Lucas did not wake. His lips were tinged blue, his chest rising and falling weakly under the white blanket. Sarah held his hand tightly and prayed in silence, even though she no longer believed in anything. An hour later, the attending physician knocked and came in. He was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and the weary eyes of someone who had seen too much suffering. He looked at Sarah, then at Lucas, then let out a slow breath. Miss Mitchell, I need to speak with you. Sarah stood and stepped into the hallway with him. She had braced herself for the worst, but when she heard what came next, it still felt like a fist driving straight into her chest. Lucas's condition is worsening faster than we expected. His heart valve is leaking severely, and his blood is not being pumped sufficiently to his organs. He needs surgery to replace the valve within 2 months. If not, I am afraid that little heart will not be able to hold out much longer. Sarah heard each word as if she were falling into a deep pit. She had known this day would come. She had known since Lucas was born and the doctors told her her son had a congenital heart defect. But knowing did not mean she was ready. How much will the surgery cost? She asked, her voice shaking. The doctor hesitated, as if searching for a softer way to say it. About $200,000, including the surgery, intensive care, and post-operative treatment. If you have insurance? I do not have insurance, Sarah cut in, her voice thick with bitterness. I do not have anything. The doctor looked at her with sympathy, but also helplessness. I understand your situation is very difficult. The hospital has a financial assistance program, but with a sum this large, I cannot be sure how much they can do. You should contact social services to learn more. He gave her shoulder a gentle pat, then turned away. Sarah stood alone in the long, hollow hallway under cold white lights. Nurses and physicians moved past her, footsteps coming and going, but she did not hear a thing. In her mind, there was only one number, spinning and pounding. $200,000. $200,000 to save her son. $200,000 that she could never earn. Her knees gave out. She leaned back against the chilled wall and slowly slid down to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. Tears streamed through her fingers and dropped onto the polished hospital tiles. She cried without sound, her shoulders shaking in waves, trying to hold it in so no one would hear. She had fought for 6 years, alone, with no one to help, no one to trust her. She had done everything she could to keep Lucas alive, to give him a life that was better than this. But fate kept pushing her down, deeper and deeper, until she no longer knew whether she could stand again. $200,000. Where could she possibly find that kind of money? Sarah sat there in that cold hospital hallway, crying by herself like a child who had been abandoned. She did not know that only a few yards away, in a shadowed corner of the corridor, a man stood watching her in silence. His gray eyes darkened, and his hand clenched into a fist at his side. Vincent Romano had come to review his annual anonymous donation to the Children's Hospital, but fate had placed him, once again, before the sight of that gaunt woman collapsing under the weight of despair. And this time, he knew he could not just stand there and watch. Vincent stood at the corner of the corridor, his back against the white wall, his eyes fixed on the woman crying alone on the hospital floor. He had come here to meet the board, to sign the papers tied to the anonymous funding he had kept in place for 3 years now, ever since Emma was gone. This was the hospital where his daughter had been treated, the place where he had once sat night after night beside a hospital bed, praying for a miracle that never came. After Emma died, he could not bring himself to step inside again, but he still sent money every year in silence, as if it were some kind of penance for his child, even though he knew money could never buy back what had been lost. But today, fate put an image in front of him again, one he could not ignore. Sarah Mitchell, the woman selling flowers in the snowy night, a single mother carrying the weight of an entire world on narrow shoulders. She sat there now, drawn in on herself like an abandoned child, tears slipping through her fingers, her shoulders shaking in choked, broken sobs. Vincent did not know how long he stood there. 1 minute, 5 minutes, maybe longer. He only knew that with every second that passed, Sarah's image began to blur into Grace's in his memory. His wife had cried like that too. She had collapsed like that too, on nights when Emma had been rushed into the emergency room. And he had not been there. He had been somewhere far away, buried in meetings and deals and things he now understood had meant nothing at all. He could not change the past, but maybe, just maybe, he could do something in the present. Vincent began to walk, each step slow, unhurried. His leather shoes tapped softly against the hospital floor, the sound echoing down the quiet hallway. Sarah did not hear him, or she did not care. She stayed where she was, head bowed, shoulders rounded as if the whole world were strapped to her back. Vincent stopped a few steps away. He did not know what to say. He was not good at comforting people. In his world, words were weapons, tools for negotiation, for threats, for control. But in front of this woman, every word felt useless. So he said nothing. He simply sat down beside her, his back against the cold wall, one knee bent, gray eyes staring straight ahead. No questions, no comfort, no advice, only the silent presence of a stranger who somehow felt familiar. Sarah flinched when she sensed someone sitting down beside her. She lifted her head, about to speak, but the words caught in her throat when she recognized the man next to her. The black coat, the tailored suit, the faint scar at his neck, and those deep gray eyes she had seen in the snow 3 nights ago. "You," she whispered, her voice raw from crying. "You are the man from that night, the sad flower man." Vincent turned to look at her, one brow lifting slightly. The sad flower man. Sarah suddenly realized she had said out loud the name Lucas had given him. Heat rose to her cheeks even though her eyes were still red. "My son calls you that," she explained, her voice growing smaller. "Because you bought the flowers but your eyes were still sad." Vincent was silent for a moment. Then the corner of his mouth moved, a smile so faint it was almost nothing. "The kid is sharp." Sarah stared at him, not understanding why this man was here, why he had sat down beside her in this cold hospital corridor. She wanted to ask, but she was too tired, too empty to question anything anymore. "I was going to return your coat and that money," she said, her voice trembling. "I do not take charity." "I know. Then why did you help me?" Vincent did not answer right away. He looked toward the end of the hallway, where nurses moved back and forth, where doors to patient rooms stayed shut, where children fought their own battles behind them. "I once had a child with a heart condition too," he said, his voice low. "In this hospital." Sarah went still. She looked at him, and for the first time she truly saw the pain in those gray eyes. Not the pain of a stranger. The pain of someone who had lost the most precious thing there is. "Your daughter, she went very far away," Vincent said, repeating the words he had spoken to Lucas that night. 3 years ago. Sarah did not offer a shallow apology. She simply sat there in silence beside him, 2 strangers sharing the same grief without needing to name it. And in that moment, in the cold hospital corridor, Sarah felt that she was not alone anymore. They sat in silence for a long time, 2 figures leaning against the cold white wall of the hospital corridor. Sarah had stopped crying, but her eyes were still red, and her hand still gripped the rumpled hem of her light blue cleaning uniform. Vincent sat beside her. He did not look at her. He did not speak. He was simply there, like an anchor in the middle of a storm. At last, Vincent spoke. His voice was low, but each word came out clear. "How much does your son's surgery cost?" Sarah startled and looked at him, not understanding how he knew. She did not ask. She only answered automatically, as though that number had been carved into her mind so deeply she no longer had to think about it. $200,000. Vincent nodded, as if it were an ordinary number. Not too big, not worth worrying over. I will pay. Sarah snapped her head toward him, eyes wide, not trusting what she had heard. What did you say? I will pay the full cost of your son's surgery, Vincent repeated, without a flicker of hesitation. The surgery, intensive care, post-operative treatment, all of it. Sarah sprang to her feet and took a step back, her gaze sharpening with alarm. Who are you? Why would you do this? What do you want from me? Vincent remained still. He did not stand. He did not move closer. He only looked at her with those deep gray eyes, with nothing that resembled a threat or a demand. I do not want anything from you. That's nonsense, Sarah said, her voice trembling, but defiant. No one gives $200,000 for nothing. What are you? Mafia. Human trafficking. What do you want me to do in exchange for that money? Vincent was silent for a moment. Then he stood, slowly, without haste. He was nearly a head taller than Sarah, his shadow falling over her like a dark curtain, but strangely, Sarah did not feel afraid. She only felt safe. You can think whatever you want about me, Vincent said, his voice low. You can hate me, doubt me, not trust me, but there is one thing I need you to understand. He paused. His gray eyes darkened, like a sky before a storm. 3 years ago, my daughter also had a heart condition. She also needed surgery. She was also in this hospital. Sarah went still, her breath catching in her chest. I had all the money in the world, Vincent continued, his voice turning rough. I had power, influence, everything people dream of. But I was not there for her when she needed me most. I was 3,000 miles away when my daughter took her last breath. He stopped, as if holding something back deep inside. Her name was Emma. She was 6 years old. Like your son, she never complained of pain. She never cried. She worried about me, about her mother, about everyone around her, right up to the very end. Sarah stood there, unable to speak. Tears rose again, but this time they were not for herself. They were for the man in front of her. The man she had thought was cold and unfeeling, when in truth he carried a wound that would never heal. I could not save my daughter, Vincent said, his voice breaking. But maybe I can help you save your son. Not because I want something from you, but because it is something I should have done a long time ago. Sarah wanted to refuse. She wanted to say she did not need anyone's pity, that she would find a way on her own, that she owed no one anything. But before she could open her mouth, a tiny voice called out from behind them. Sad flower man. Both Sarah and Vincent turned. Lucas stood in the doorway of the hospital room, the IV line still taped to his hand, his face pale, but his eyes lighting up when he saw Vincent. Before anyone could stop him, the boy ran toward Vincent, small feet wobbling on the hospital floor, and wrapped his arms around Vincent's leg. Sad flower man, you came to see me. Vincent froze, his whole body turning to stone. He looked down at the little boy clinging to him, wide eyes lifted in the kind of absolute trust only children are capable of. Mom talks about you a lot, Lucas said, innocent and bright. Mom says you are a good person. Mom says you gave her money so we could rent a warm room. Vincent could not find words. He only stood there, staring down at that small boy with eyes so much like Emma's, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt something warm spread through the cold, empty place in his chest. Sarah watched what was happening, and tears spilled again. She watched her son hold on to a stranger, as if he were family. She watched Vincent standing stiff as stone, yet his eyes had softened, warmed, filled with something she had never seen before. And in that moment, she knew she could not refuse. Not because of the money, not for herself, but because Lucas trusted him, and she could not betray her son's trust. All right, she said very softly, her voice shaking. But I will pay you back, somehow. I will pay back everything. Vincent looked at her, then down at Lucas, still clinging to his leg, and nodded. We will talk later. Right now, let me take care of the boy first. After the nurse brought Lucas back into his room and checked his vitals again, Vincent led Sarah to a small meeting room at the end of the corridor. It was the kind of room doctors used to speak with families. A simple table and chairs, cold white lighting, a vase of artificial flowers in the corner, a clumsy attempt at warmth. Sarah sat down, spine straight, hands placed on her thighs. She looked directly at Vincent with a wariness she did not bother to hide. She had agreed to accept help, but that did not mean she would allow herself to be controlled. I have conditions, she said, calm, but unyielding. Vincent sat across from her, his face giving away nothing. He nodded for her to continue. First, I will work to pay you back. I do not know how long it will take, but I will repay every dollar. I do not take charity. Vincent said nothing, only watched her with an expression she could not read. Second, I will not do anything illegal. I do not know who you are or what you do, but I have heard enough rumors about men who ride in black cars and wear expensive suits like yours. I will not be involved in anything shady. I have a son to raise, and I will not let Lucas grow up with a criminal for a mother. Vincent's mouth shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, not quite anything else. And third, Sarah continued, her voice hardening, when I have paid the debt in full, Lucas and I will leave. No ties, no contact, no relationship of any kind. You help me, I repay you, and we are even, clear and fair. She stopped, her breath coming quicker after speaking without pause. She waited for Vincent to argue. She waited for him to counter with conditions of his own. She waited for him to reveal the true face of a man who always had an angle. But Vincent only stayed quiet for a moment, gray eyes on her as if he were reading every thought in her head. Then he nodded. All right. Sarah blinked, not believing she had heard him correctly. All right. I agree to all your conditions, Vincent said, as calmly as if they were discussing the weather. You will work at one of my restaurants. It is legal work, decent pay, nothing connected to anything you are worried about. You will work until you feel you have repaid enough, and then you can leave. Sarah frowned. You are not going to convert the money into a number of hours or something like that. No. You decide when it is enough. Why? She asked, suspicion plain in her eyes. Why do you trust me like that? Vincent rose and walked to the small window that looked out onto the hospital corridor. He stood there for a moment with his back to her. His voice, low, carried through the quiet room. Because I saw the way you protected your son. A mother who will step in front of a stranger in a snowy night to protect her child will never do anything that could harm her child. Sarah could not speak. She only sat there, watching the broad line of Vincent's back, and felt something inside her chest shift. Vincent turned around, took out his phone, and made a brief call. He spoke a few words in a voice that carried authority, then ended the call. The surgery will be scheduled for tomorrow, he said. I spoke with the hospital director. The best surgeon will perform the operation. You do not need to worry about anything. Sarah stood, her legs unsteady. Tomorrow. That fast. The boy does not have time to wait, Vincent said, his voice softer. And I do not want you to have to wait one more day. She looked at him, and for the first time she did not see a powerful boss, not a suspicious stranger. She saw only a father who had lost his child, trying to make amends for something he could not save in the past. Thank you, she said very softly. Vincent did not answer. He only nodded, then opened the door and stepped out. But before he disappeared, he stopped and spoke without turning back. Tomorrow, after the boy goes into surgery, I will be there. You do not have to wait alone. Then he was gone behind the door, leaving Sarah standing there as tears once again slid down her cheeks. The next morning, the Chicago sky remained gray and heavy as Sarah's heart. She stood by the hospital bed from before dawn, watching Lucas sleep in an oversized hospital gown that swallowed his small frame. His face looked peaceful, his lips a little pinker now, helped along by IV fluids and real rest. She bent down and kissed his forehead, fighting to hold back the tears that kept rising. Lucas woke, wide eyes turning to his mother. Today I am going to have surgery so I will not be sick anymore. Right, Mom? Sarah nodded and forced a smile. That's right, sweetheart. After you take a nap, you will wake up and your heart will be strong, just like other kids. Lucas smiled, clear and bright, without a trace of fear. I am not scared, Mom. The sad flower man said he will be here with you. You will not have to wait alone. Sarah blinked, surprised. She did not know when Vincent had spoken with Lucas, but before she could ask, the nurses came in to prepare to take Lucas back. She held her son's hand until the gurney rolled through the operating room doors. She stood there watching the doors close, watching the light that read surgery in progress switch on, and felt as if a piece of her soul had been torn away. Sarah sat down on a hard plastic chair in the waiting area, hands clenched together, eyes locked on the operating room doors. 1 hour passed, 2, 3. She did not eat, did not drink, did not move. She only sat there like stone, praying for a miracle. At the 4th hour, Vincent appeared. He came without a sound and sat down in the chair beside her without saying a word. Sarah glanced at him, then looked back at the operating room doors. She did not ask why he had come. She did not ask how long he had been there. She only knew that his presence made her feel a little less alone. Daniel stood at the end of the hallway, phone in his hand, his face tight with tension. He had called Vincent at least 10 times in the past 2 hours, reminding him about the meeting with partners from New York, a multi-million-dollar meeting they had been preparing for 3 months. But Vincent had said only one sentence before ending the call. "Cancel everything. I am not going anywhere." Daniel could not believe what he was hearing. In 10 years working for Vincent Romano, he had never seen his boss cancel something that important. Vincent was the man who put business above everything. Vincent was the man who would take overnight flights to make it to a negotiation. Vincent was the man who never allowed anything to get in the way of a deal. But now, his boss was sitting on a cheap plastic chair in a hospital, beside a woman he had met only days ago, waiting through the surgery of a child who was not even his own. Daniel did not understand, but he did not ask. He only stood there, quietly keeping watch, as he always did. 5 hours, 6, 7. Sarah began to shake. She had not eaten in 24 hours. Her head swam, her vision blurred, but she did not leave the chair. She could not leave while her son was fighting death behind that door. Vincent stood up, went somewhere for a while, then returned with a bottle of water and a sandwich. He placed them into her hands without speaking. Sarah looked at him and wanted to refuse, but he had already sat back down, eyes forward, as if whether she ate or not was none of his concern. But she knew he did care, because he was still here, for 8 full hours. She took a sip of water and bit off a small piece of the sandwich. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to swallow. For Lucas, because she needed strength to be there when he woke. 8 hours. The operating room doors opened. The surgeon stepped out. Green scrubs darkened with sweat. The mask pulled down under his chin. Sarah jumped to her feet, legs shaking so badly she nearly fell. Vincent rose too, one hand catching her elbow to steady her. "Miss Mitchell." "Yes, that's me. How is my son?" The doctor looked at her, then gave a tired but warm smile. "The surgery was successful. The new heart valve has been replaced and is functioning well. He is being transferred to recovery now. You can see him in about 1 hour." Sarah stood there, unable to speak. Then her knees buckled and she began to cry. Crying from relief, crying from gratitude, crying for all the long nights of fear, all the months of despair, all the moments she had thought she could not go on. Vincent stood beside her. He did not speak. He did not touch her. But he did not leave. He simply remained there, a steady anchor in the storm, so she would know she did not have to face everything alone anymore. And at the far end of the hallway, Daniel watched the scene, and for the first time he understood that perhaps his boss was not entirely the monster the world believed him to be. 3 weeks after the surgery, Lucas was discharged. He was still weak and needed to take his medicine on schedule and return for regular checkups, but the doctor said that with the right care, he would be able to live a normal life, like any other child. Sarah held him close and cried without a sound, hardly daring to believe a miracle had truly happened. When they stepped out through the hospital entrance, Daniel was already waiting beside a gleaming black SUV. He opened the door and nodded to Sarah with a kind of courtesy she had never seen from men like him. "The boss told me to take you and your son to your new place." Sarah hesitated. A new place. Daniel did not explain. He only gestured for her to get in. Sarah looked down at Lucas, his hand locked tightly around hers, then looked toward the battered old car parked at the edge of the lot, the place they had lived for so many months. She drew a deep breath and climbed into the SUV. They drove through familiar Chicago streets, then turned into a quiet suburban neighborhood. The houses were not extravagant, but they were clean and orderly, with small yards blanketed in snow and cream-painted wooden fences. The SUV stopped in front of a low-rise apartment building, modern in its lines but warm in its feel, with large windows facing a small park across the street. Daniel led them up to the 3rd floor and stopped at apartment 12. He opened the door with a brand-new key, then placed it in Sarah's hand. "This is your home now." Sarah stepped inside and had to catch her breath. The apartment was not large, but it was enough for the two of them. A living room with a light gray sofa, an oak coffee table, and a plush rug laid softly across the floor. A compact kitchen with a refrigerator packed with food, a brand new stove, and shining cookware that had never been used. The larger bedroom held a double bed dressed in crisp white linens. The smaller bedroom had been arranged like a child's room, with a single bed, a desk, and cartoon pictures taped to the wall. Lucas slipped free from his mother's hand and ran through the apartment, his eyes bright. "Mom, there is a real bed, a real kitchen, and our own bathroom too, Mom." He ran into the smaller bedroom, climbed onto the bed, and began to roll back and forth on the soft mattress. His clear laughter filled the room, and Sarah stood in the doorway as tears rose again. She could not remember the last time she had heard her child laugh like that. When Lucas finally tired and lay down to rest on the new bed, Sarah returned to the living room and looked around more carefully. Everything was new, clean, prepared with such care it felt as if someone had thought of every smallest detail. She opened the closet and found a few sets of clothes already there for both of them, the right sizes, the same simple style she usually wore. Then she walked into Lucas's room again. In the corner she noticed a small oak bookcase painted a soft cream, filled with children's books. She stepped closer and let her fingers skim across the colorful spines. The Little Prince, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Jungle Book, classic stories every child should grow up with. Then her fingers touched a book older than the rest, its spine slightly worn. She pulled it out, and her heart seemed to stop when she saw the handwritten words on the first page. To my beloved Emma, sleep well every night. The letters slanted, strong, yet threaded with gentleness. Sarah stood there, with the book held in both hands, tears sliding down her cheeks. This was not a bookcase bought new for Lucas. This had been Emma's bookcase. The bookcase Vincent had kept for 3 years, and now he had brought it here, set it down in Lucas's room. Sarah did not know what to think. She did not know what to feel. She only knew that the man the world called a monster, the man said to be cold and ruthless, had placed his most precious treasure into her son's hands. Sarah sank down to the floor, her back against the bookcase, the storybook pressed to her chest. She cried, not from pain, but because for the first time in 6 years, she felt that someone truly cared, and she found herself wondering who Vincent Romano really was. 2 weeks after moving into the new apartment, Sarah began her job at an Italian restaurant called La Dolce Vita, located in the heart of Chicago. It was one of the most luxurious restaurants in the city, with warm walnut interiors, crystal chandeliers that caught the light like falling stars, and a menu where each dish cost what used to be an entire week of her wages. Sarah was assigned to manage the books, a small office position upstairs, far from the dining room and the guests. The work was not too hard. She checked invoices, reconciled figures, organized reservation schedules. Everything was legal, exactly as Vincent had promised. Her pay was enough to cover their living expenses and buy Lucas's medication. There was even a little left over to save. Her co-workers treated her with polite distance. No one pried too deeply into where she came from. On the surface, it all looked perfect. But Sarah was not someone who could be fooled easily. She began to notice the strange things. Men in black suits coming and going through the back entrance. Faces hard and blank. Eyes always sweeping the area. Rushed phone calls taken in corners of the restaurant. Voices low and edged with threat. And most of all, the unnatural bulges at their hips. Shapes she knew too well. Guns. These men were carrying guns. One evening, when Sarah stayed late to finish the end-of-month report, she heard voices through the room next door. She was not trying to eavesdrop, but the wall was thin enough that she could not help hearing. Caruso is causing trouble at the docks. How is the boss going to handle it? He already sent word. 2 of Caruso's men were found in the Chicago River this morning. Serves them right. Nobody touches Vincent Romano's territory. Sarah stood there, fingers tightening around the stack of papers, her heart hammering wildly in her chest. Vincent Romano, a name spoken with absolute reverence and fear, a name she had heard somewhere before, in whispered stories about Chicago's underworld. The next day, after Lucas fell asleep, Sarah sat at the old computer in the living room and searched that name. The results sent a chill straight through her bones. Vincent Romano, a mafia boss controlling the south side of Chicago, the son of Antonio Romano, a legendary boss now retired. Nicknamed the Devil of Chicago for his merciless cruelty toward enemies, never arrested, never convicted. Yet everyone knew who he was, and everyone knew what he did. Sarah shut the computer down and sat still in the dark. The man who had saved her son was a mafia boss. The man who had sat beside her for 8 hours in the hospital was a killer. The man who had given Lucas the bookcase that once belonged to his daughter was the monster the entire city feared. She should have been terrified. She should have taken Lucas and run that very night, gone as far away as possible from a man like this. But she did not, because she remembered the sadness in his gray eyes when he spoke of Emma. She remembered the way he sat beside her in the hospital corridor, saying nothing, offering no speeches, yet refusing to leave. She remembered the handwritten words inside the storybook. To my beloved Emma, sleep well every night. Monsters did not write words like that. Monsters did not keep their dead daughter's bookcase for 3 years. Monsters did not sit and wait for 8 hours through the surgery of a child who was not their own. Sarah rose and walked into Lucas's room, looking at her son asleep in his new bed. He was holding tight to a teddy bear she had found among Emma's books, his face peaceful, almost angelic. She did not know who Vincent Romano truly was. She did not know what he had done in the dark world that belonged to him. But she knew one thing for certain. He had saved her son, and that, whether she wanted it or not, had changed everything. Lucas was doing much better a month after the surgery. Color had returned to his cheeks. His lips were no longer tinged blue the way they used to be. He could run and play in the small park near their apartment without getting winded. Sarah watched him under the late afternoon sun, and for the first time in years, she felt her chest loosen, as if she could finally breathe. That evening, while Sarah cooked dinner in the small kitchen, Lucas sat at the table with a box of colored pencils and a stack of blank paper. He drew with total focus, wide eyes locked on the page, his tongue poking out a little, the way it always did when he concentrated. "What are you drawing?" Sarah asked, stirring the soup. "I am drawing the sad flower man," Lucas answered without looking up. Sarah paused, curiosity rising. She wiped her hands on a towel, stepped closer, and looked down at the picture. She had to catch her breath. On the paper was a tall man in a black suit, gray eyes drawn big in a child's style. But what stunned Sarah was the pair of large black wings coming out of the man's back. Lucas had colored the wings carefully, layer after layer, black pencil mixed with streaks of gray and silvery shine. "Why did you draw him with wings?" Sarah asked gently. Lucas looked up and smiled, bright and innocent. "Because he is the black-dressed angel, Mom. Angels have to have wings. The black-dressed angel. Yes, he wears black, but he is really good. He saved me. He saved you. He is an angel, Mom." Sarah did not know what to say. She only stood there, staring at her son's simple drawing, so childish and yet so full of meaning, and felt something tighten in her throat. 3 days later, Vincent came to the restaurant to check on things. It was the first time Sarah had seen him since the day she moved into the new apartment. He looked the same as ever, cold, distant, gray eyes sweeping over everything as if he were weighing every smallest detail. But when he stepped into Sarah's office to review the reports, Lucas was there too, sitting on a small chair in the corner, drawing while he waited for his mother to finish work. "Sad flower man," Lucas shouted, jumping down and running toward Vincent. Vincent stopped and looked down at the boy in surprise. Before he could react, Lucas had pushed the drawing into his hand. "I drew this for you. Do you like it?" Vincent took the paper and looked at the man in the black suit with the large wings. His eyes flickered, as if something had touched the deepest place inside him. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. "It's you. You are our black-dressed angel." Sarah stood in the corner of the office, holding her breath as she waited for Vincent's reaction. She did not know what he would say, what he would do. Maybe he would give a thin smile and hand it back. Maybe he would walk away without caring. But Vincent did not do either. He folded the drawing slowly, carefully, then slipped it into the inside pocket of his black suit jacket, right beside his heart. Lucas grinned from ear to ear, then suddenly asked a question that made both Sarah and Vincent freeze. "Sad flower man, when are you coming to our home for dinner? My mom cooks really good." Sarah was about to refuse for Vincent, but he spoke first. "All right." She stared at him, not believing what she had heard. Vincent looked back at her. His gray eyes were still cool, still guarded, but something in them had shifted, a small spark she had never seen before. "Tomorrow night, all right." The next evening, Sarah had been in the kitchen since 4 o'clock, hands clumsy around pots and pans. She did not understand why she was so tense. This was supposed to be an ordinary dinner, a simple meal for a mother and her son, nothing special. But the moment she pictured Vincent Romano, the most notorious Mafia boss in Chicago, sitting at the small dining table in her modest apartment, her hands began to shake again. Lucas was the complete opposite. He raced through the apartment, putting away toys, straightening chairs, even picking a few wildflowers from the nearby park to place in a glass cup at the center of the table. "Mom, what color does the sad flower man like?" Lucas asked, eyes shining. "I do not know, sweetheart. He probably likes black. He always wears black." Sarah could not help laughing. Her son had a way of seeing the world with a strange, disarming simplicity. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Sarah drew a deep breath, smoothed her hair, and opened the door. Vincent stood there in the familiar black suit, but in his hands he carried a bottle of wine and a boxed building toy set for children. He looked at Sarah, gave a short nod in greeting, and stepped inside when she invited him. "Sad flower man," Lucas shouted, running out to wrap both arms around Vincent's leg as if he were family. "You are here. I have been waiting all day." Vincent looked down at him, and Sarah noticed the faintest lift at the corner of his mouth, a smile so slight it was almost invisible. They sat at the table. Sarah had made pasta with tomato sauce, a tossed salad, and garlic toast. It was not a lavish meal, but it was everything she could manage with her limited cooking skills. "I am sorry it is not like what you have at your restaurant," she said, a little embarrassed. "I did not come here to eat restaurant food," Vincent replied, his voice calm but not cold. The meal began in an awkward silence. Sarah did not know what to say, and Vincent was not the type to make polite conversation. The clink of forks against plates, the sound of chewing, the steady ticking of the wall clock filled the space between them. Then Lucas spoke, breaking the silence with the most innocent question imaginable. "Sad flower man, what color do you like?" Vincent looked up, surprised. "What color?" "Yes, your favorite color. Mine is blue. Mom's is purple. What about you?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, as if this was the hardest question he had ever been asked. "I do not know," he said very softly. "It has been a long time since anyone asked me that." Lucas tilted his head and thought for a moment. "Then I will choose for you. You should like gray. Because your eyes are gray. They are really pretty." Sarah nearly choked on her water. She glanced at Vincent, not sure how he would react. But he only looked at Lucas, and his gray eyes softened in a way that felt almost unreal. "All right. Gray." After that, the dinner grew lighter. Lucas kept asking Vincent one innocent question after another. "What do you like to eat? Do you have a dog? Can you fly since you have wings?" Vincent answered each one, brief but patient, and Sarah realized it was the first time she had ever seen him talk this much. After dinner, Lucas insisted that Vincent stay to watch cartoons with him. Vincent looked at Sarah as if asking permission, and she nodded. The three of them sat on the sofa, Lucas in the middle, eyes fixed on the television, a cartoon about a small fish trying to find its way home. In less than 20 minutes, Lucas fell asleep, his head resting on Vincent's thigh, one arm wrapped around his teddy bear, his breathing steady and peaceful. Sarah started to lift her son and carry him to bed, but Vincent motioned for her to stay. He looked down at the sleeping boy on his lap. His gray eyes darkened, but not with anger or coldness, with pain. "Emma used to fall asleep like this too," he said quietly, his voice sounding as if it might crack. "She liked cartoons. She used to rest her head on my lap and drift off. I would carry her to bed, tuck her in, kiss her forehead, but sometimes I was too busy. I would set her down on the sofa and go back to work." He stopped, his breathing heavier. "I did not know I would not have much time like that left." Sarah sat there and let tears fall silently. She did not speak. She did not offer shallow comfort. She only stayed, listening, letting Vincent say the things he had carried inside for 3 years. And in that small, warm apartment, with a little boy sleeping peacefully between them, two strangers began to understand each other, just a little more. 1 week after that dinner, Sarah took Lucas back to the hospital for his routine follow-up. He was so much stronger now. His cheeks were rosy, his steps quick and sure, with no trace left of the child who had been fading on a hospital bed not long ago. The doctor examined him and said everything looked good. The new valve was working perfectly, and Lucas only needed to keep taking his prescribed medication for the next 6 months. Sarah pulled her son into her arms when she heard the good news, tears of joy slipping down her cheeks. She had never imagined she would live to hear words like that. After the paperwork was done, she guided Lucas down the hallway toward the elevators. But as they passed the pediatric oncology wing, she stopped without meaning to. Through the glass window of the common room, she saw something she could not believe. Vincent Romano was sitting on a small chair meant for children. Around him were 5 or 6 kids with bald heads from chemotherapy, their eyes bright as they watched him. He held a book in his hands, and his deep voice carried through the quiet room. "Please draw me a sheep. The Little Prince," the very book Sarah had seen in Emma's bookcase in Lucas's room. She stood there, frozen. Vincent Romano, the Mafia boss all of Chicago feared, was reading a fairy tale to children with cancer. No Daniel, no bodyguards, no black convoy, no men in suits with guns. Just him, alone, sitting among children fighting a cruel disease. "Mom, that's the sad flower man," Lucas whispered, bursting with excitement. Sarah quickly covered his mouth and pulled him back from the window. She did not want Vincent to know she was there, did not want him to think she was watching him, but she could not tear her eyes away from the scene in front of her. Vincent kept reading, his voice gentle and patient in a way she had never seen from him. When he reached the part where the little prince spoke about his rose, a little girl of about 4, wearing a pink headscarf, crawled closer and leaned against his arm as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Vincent did not push her away. He only paused for a moment, looked down at her, then continued reading. Something tightened in Sarah's throat. She had heard the rumors about Vincent Romano. She had read the articles. She knew who he was in the underworld, but the man sitting in that room, reading to children who might not live much longer, did not match anything she had ever imagined. When Vincent finished a chapter, a boy of about 6, with wide eyes and pale skin, raised his hand. "Sir, are you someone's dad?" The room fell quiet. Sarah held her breath, waiting for the answer. Vincent looked at the boy. His gray eyes darkened. He was silent for a long time, so long Sarah thought he would not answer at all. "I was," he said very softly. "I used to be the father of a little princess." "Where is she now?" the boy asked. "Innocent, as only a child can be. She flew up to the sky and became a star." The little girl in the pink scarf looked up at Vincent, eyes shining. "Like the little prince, right? The little prince goes back to his star too." Vincent looked down at her, and Sarah saw his eyes had turned red. He did not cry, but she could see he was holding back something huge inside him. "Yes, like the little prince." Sarah turned away and led Lucas from the window. She did not want Vincent to know she had seen that moment, the moment when he let the man behind the cold mask show through. On the way home, Lucas held his mother's hand and looked up at her. "Mom, why does the sad flower man read books to the sick kids?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, then answered softly, "Because he understands their pain, sweetheart. He is really good, right, Mom?" Sarah did not answer. She only squeezed her son's hand and quietly wiped away the tear sliding down her cheek. She did not know what Vincent Romano was like in his dark world, but she knew that in that hospital room, he was not a devil. He was only a father trying to heal the wound in his heart by bringing a little joy to children with no future. And whether she wanted it or not, it made her see him through completely different eyes. That night, Vincent came by the apartment to bring a set of work-related papers for Sarah to sign. He had started showing up more often, not because of work, but because Lucas kept insisting, again and again, that he wanted to see the sad flower man whenever there was a chance. Sarah did not object. She had begun to grow used to Vincent being there, used to the way he sat quietly on the sofa while Lucas chattered about school, used to the way those gray eyes softened each time he looked at her little boy. It was late, nearly 11 o'clock. Then Lucas's shrill crying burst out from the bedroom. Sarah had been talking with Vincent in the living room. She rushed to her son. Lucas was upright in bed. Sweat soaked his body. His big round eyes, wide with terror, stared into empty space. Lucas sobbed. "Mom, I am so scared. I dreamed you left me. I called for you, but you did not turn back." Sarah pulled him tight against her chest. She stroked his hair, drenched with sweat. "I am here. I am not going anywhere. I will stay with you forever." She began to sing him a lullaby. Her voice was gentle and warm, the same song she had sung to Lucas since he was still inside her. Little by little, Lucas's breathing evened out, his eyelids lowered, and in his mother's arms, he slipped into a peaceful sleep. When Sarah stepped out of the room, she saw Vincent standing just outside the door. His back leaned against the wall. His gray eyes looked into nothing. She did not know how long he had been there, or how much he had heard. "You can go home now," she said softly. "It is very late." Vincent did not answer. He simply stood there in silence, as if he had fallen into some faraway memory. "Grace used to sing like that to Emma," he murmured, his voice sounding as though it might break. Sarah stopped. She turned to look at him. This was the first time he had spoken of his wife and daughter in front of her. They stepped out onto the small balcony. In the distance, city lights shimmered. The night wind was cold, brushing past them. Vincent leaned against the railing. His gaze lifted into the dark sky, and he began to tell his story. Emma was frail from the moment she was born. The doctors said she had a congenital defect in her heart valve, just like Lucas. Grace cried through those first days. "But I did not," Vincent said. "I believed money could fix anything. I thought I would make a lot of money, hire the best doctors, buy the best medicine, and she would be fine." He paused. He drew in a long breath. "I was wrong. I was too busy building my empire. I told myself I was doing it all for my family. But the truth is, I was running from the hospital room, from the harsh, unrelenting beeps of the machines, from the look in her eyes each time I said Dad has to go on a business trip." Sarah stood beside him, listening in silence. She did not interrupt. She did not question him. She simply let him say the words he had likely kept locked inside for 3 years. "That night, I was in New York, 3,000 miles from Chicago. An important negotiation, worth millions of dollars. I thought I would make it back in time, before Emma woke up the next morning. But I did not make it back." His voice caught. "Grace called me at 2 a.m. She was crying so hard I could not make out what she was saying. There was only one sentence I heard clearly. 'She is gone, Vincent. Our daughter is gone.'" Sarah felt tears surge up. She did not wipe them away. She stood still and let them fall, quietly, into the night. I flew back that same night. When I arrived, Emma was lying still on the hospital bed. Her eyes were shut tight. Her small lips had turned a purplish blue. I held her in my arms. I kept calling her name, over and over, but she did not answer. She never answered again. Vincent turned to Sarah. His gray eyes were red and swollen, yet no tears fell. Grace blamed me. She said if I had been there, maybe Emma would have fought harder. She said I chose work instead of family, and I could not argue, because deep down, I thought so too. He stopped again. His breathing grew heavy. 6 months later, I came home and found Grace in the bathtub. She had taken sleeping pills. Beside her was a letter. I am going to find our child. I cannot forgive you, and I cannot forgive myself. Sarah lifted a hand to cover her mouth, holding back the sound rising in her throat. I lost them both within 6 months, and I cannot blame anyone but myself. Silence settled over the small balcony. Only the night wind moved. Only the faraway sound of the city drifted up to them. Then Sarah did something she never expected herself to do. She reached out. She gently took Vincent's icy hand. He did not pull away. He remained there, facing the night sky. And for the first time in 3 years, he allowed someone to stand beside him in his pain. They stood on the balcony in silence for a long time, Sarah's hand still resting lightly around Vincent's. The night wind cut cold, yet neither of them wanted to leave. There was something in this moment, an invisible thread, binding two strangers together through wounds they both understood. Vincent turned to her. His gray eyes were still rimmed with red. You have never told me your story. Sarah drew her hand back. She let out a quiet sigh. She had carried this story inside her for 6 years. She had told no one. She had not dared to trust anyone. But tonight, after what Vincent had shared, she felt she needed someone to listen to her too. 6 years ago, I was a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, she began, her voice gentle but trembling. I loved my work. I thought I would be a nurse for the rest of my life, caring for patients, bringing a little comfort to people who were hurting. But one night, everything collapsed. She stopped. She took a deep breath. I was working the night shift in the emergency department. When I went to get medication for a patient, I accidentally opened the wrong door, the one that led to the restricted pharmaceutical storage. Inside, I saw Dr. Richard Hayes. He was packing boxes of strong painkillers into his own bag. Vincent frowned, listening without a word. I saw something I was never meant to see, and he saw me. The next day, I was called into the director's office. They told me there was evidence I had stolen pain medication from the pharmacy storage. Security cameras, witnesses, everything was stacked against me. I was fired on the spot. My license was revoked, and my name was blacklisted in the medical field. Her voice tightened. They marched me out of the hospital in front of patients and coworkers like I was a criminal. People who had laughed and talked with me every day turned their faces away. No one believed me. Not a single person. Vincent stood there, his hand clenched into a fist at his side, but he did not interrupt. When I got home, I thought at least Kevin, my husband, would stand by me. We had been married for 2 years. I was 4 months pregnant. I thought even if the whole world turned its back, he would still believe me. She let out a bitter, hollow laugh. But I was wrong. Kevin looked at me with disgust. He said he did not marry a criminal. He said he did not want his child to have a mother like me. Then he packed his things. He took all our shared savings from the account, nearly $50,000, and he disappeared. I never saw him again. Sarah turned her face toward the city lights, her eyes blurred with tears. I carried my pregnancy alone. I gave birth alone. I raised Lucas alone. No help. No trust. Every time I applied for a job, they rejected me the moment they saw my record. I did whatever I had to do just to survive. Washing dishes, mopping floors, selling flowers, collecting scrap. Anything. As long as Lucas had food, a roof over his head, and medicine when he needed it. She turned back to Vincent. Tears streamed down her cheeks. You asked me why I would not accept charity, why I am so stubborn. Because for 6 years, I have been treated like a criminal, a liar, someone who does not deserve to be trusted. I had to carry everything on my own. No one stood with me, and I no longer dared to lean on anyone. Silence covered the balcony again. The wind rose, harder now, but neither of them moved. Then Vincent spoke, his voice low, steady. I believe you. Sarah looked up at him, eyes wide. You did not steal those drugs. You were framed. Tears spilled over. But this time not from pain. This time, because for the first time in 6 years, someone looked her in the eye and said they believed her. How do you know? She asked, her voice shaking. Because I have seen the way you protect your son. A mother who is willing to go hungry so her child can eat, willing to sleep in a cold car so her child can have a blanket. That kind of mother would never do anything that could make her child ashamed. He paused. His gray eyes held hers, and I investigated Hayes. He is a drug dealer. You were the victim, sacrificed to silence you. Sarah stood there, unable to speak. 6 years of swallowed injustice. 6 years of the world turning its back. And now, the man the world called a devil was the only one who believed her. She began to cry the way she had never allowed herself to cry. And Vincent stayed where he was. He said nothing. He simply lifted his hand and rested it on her shoulder, quietly letting her know she did not have to be alone anymore. 1 week after that night on the balcony, everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. Sarah worked steady hours at the restaurant. Lucas was healthy and happy, going to school every day, and Vincent stopped by the apartment now and then to have dinner with mother and son. No one said it out loud, but something was changing between them. An invisible thread, growing tighter, stronger, day by day. That afternoon, Sarah got off early. She picked Lucas up from school. They were walking along the familiar route back to the apartment when a black luxury car pulled up at the curb. The door opened. A man stepped out. He looked about 65, white hair combed straight back, a sharp, angular face, deep wrinkles carved around eyes as cold as ice. He wore an expensive gray suit. In one hand, he held a dark ebony cane with a silver head, and he carried a kind of frightening authority Sarah had never felt before. Even Vincent had never made her feel threatened the way this man did. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" he asked, his voice low and rough, heavy with command. Sarah pulled Lucas behind her. The instinct to protect her son surged up hard. "Who are you?" "Antonio Romano, Vincent's father." Sarah went still. Her heart slammed wildly in her chest. She had heard Daniel mention that name. The legendary retired Mafia boss. The man who built the empire Vincent now ran. And now he stood in front of her, his cold eyes sweeping over her as if she were an item being appraised. "Who are you to distract my son like this?" Antonio asked, contempt dripping from every word. "A street flower girl, a nurse who was fired for stealing pain medication. Do you think you are worthy of Vincent Romano?" Sarah said nothing, but her hand tightened around Lucas's. Antonio stepped closer. His gaze was sharp as a razor. "I investigated you. I know everything. You are not the kind of person who should be tangled up with the Romano family. You are only a burden, a weakness, and in our world, weaknesses are eliminated." "What do you want?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking, but her chin did not lower. Antonio smiled, a smile that was cold, that never reached his eyes. "I want you gone from my son's life. Take the money, take anything you want, and disappear. Take the boy far away, and never come back. I do not need your money." "Do you?" Antonio tilted his head, his eyes full of mocking amusement. "Do you know how the people close to Vincent die? His mother died giving birth to him. His wife killed herself. His daughter died of heart disease. Everyone he loves leaves him. Do you want that boy to be next?" Sarah took a step back. Her blood turned to ice. Antonio moved forward. His cane tapped lightly against the pavement, a thin clicking sound echoing in the empty alley. "Vincent is not a man who can protect anyone. He is a devil, and anyone who gets close to a devil pays the price. If you truly care about him, you should vanish. That is the best way to protect your boy." "You are lying." The voice was small, but filled with fury. Lucas stepped out from behind his mother, his big bright eyes locked onto Antonio's without a trace of fear. "The sad flower man is not a devil. He is good. He saved me. He saved my mom. He is a black-clothed angel." Antonio looked down at the boy. For a moment, something unreadable flickered in his cold eyes. He was silent, studying Lucas from head to toe. Then he let out a slow breath. "This boy, he is so much like Emma." Sarah went numb at the sound of that sentence. Lucas stayed where he was, his small hands clenched into little fists. His eyes did not waver from Antonio's face. "Do not say bad things about the sad flower man," Lucas went on, his voice trembling with anger. But he did not retreat. "He is already so sad. You are not allowed to make him sadder." Antonio watched Lucas a moment longer. Then he turned to Sarah. His eyes were still cold, but something in them had shifted. "You have 1 week to think. If you are still here after 1 week, do not blame me for not warning you." He turned away. He got into the car. The black luxury sedan slid off down the street, leaving Sarah and Lucas standing in the empty alley. Sarah pulled her son close. Her whole body shook. She watched the car disappear at the end of the road. And for the first time since meeting Vincent, she felt real fear. Not fear of Vincent, but fear of the world he belonged to. That night, Sarah could not sleep. She sat on the bed, hugging a pillow, staring out the window where the city lights glittered in the distance. Antonio's threat kept echoing inside her head. The people who stay close to Vincent all die. Do you want that boy to be the next one? She did not tell Vincent about meeting Antonio. She did not know what to say. She did not know how he would react, but she knew something was wrong. Something buried in black was hiding beneath the surface. A secret she still could not see through. Meanwhile, at the Romano estate, Vincent sat in his study with Daniel. Thick folders lay open around them. Computer screens glowed bright in the dim room. After the night Sarah told him about her past, Vincent had ordered Daniel to dig deeper into what happened at St. Mary's Hospital. He wanted the truth. He wanted to find the person who destroyed her life. "Boss, I have new information," Daniel said, placing a folder on the desk. "And you are not going to like what I found." Vincent looked at his guard. His gray eyes darkened. "Talk." Daniel drew a deep breath, as if bracing for a storm. Dr. Richard Hayes was not only stealing pain medication from the hospital. He is the main supplier for the Caruso gang. They use strong painkillers from the hospital to cook synthetic drugs and distribute them all across North Chicago. Vincent's brow tightened. Caruso was his enemy, the gang he had battled for years over territory. Sarah Mitchell was framed because she accidentally discovered Hayes' stash, Daniel continued. She saw what she was not meant to see, and Hayes needed to silence her. Instead of killing her, he chose something more refined. He destroyed her reputation and made sure no one would ever believe a word she said. Vincent's fist clenched so hard his knuckles went white. "Does Hayes have ties to anyone in our organization?" Daniel hesitated. His eyes flicked away. "Daniel," Vincent growled, his voice cold as ice. "I asked you, does Hayes have ties to anyone in our organization?" Daniel swallowed, then answered, his voice trembling. "Yes, boss. Hayes has been protected by someone inside the Romano organization. That person has covered for Hayes' drug operation for years, in exchange for a share of the profits." "Who?" Silence. "Who?" Vincent snapped, slamming his palm on the desk, the sound exploding through the room. Daniel looked at him, his eyes full of pity and fear. "Antonio Romano. Your father." Vincent went rigid, as if his body had turned to stone. He stared at Daniel, waiting for him to say it was a cruel joke. But there was no joke in Daniel's eyes. "That is impossible," Vincent whispered, his voice rough. "My father is retired. He is not involved in anything anymore." "Boss," I checked carefully, Daniel said. "Antonio began working with Caruso 5 years ago, when he realized protecting a drug pipeline would bring in bigger profits than the traditional operations. Hayes was his piece inside the hospital." Vincent stood. He walked to the window, turning his back on Daniel. He stared into the night sky. His shoulders were pulled tight as wire. "So that means... It means Antonio is the one who indirectly destroyed Sarah Mitchell's life. She was framed. She was fired. Her husband left her. She ended up living in a car with a child who has a heart condition. All because she happened to see something your father did not want anyone to see." Vincent stood there, silent, but the air in the room felt frozen by the fury rising inside him. Daniel watched Vincent's shoulders tremble, watched his hand tighten into a fist until the joint stood out pale. "Boss, there is one more thing," Daniel said very quietly. "What?" "Today, Antonio went to see Sarah. He threatened her. He told her to leave your life within 1 week, or he would take action." Vincent spun around. His gray eyes flared like 2 fires from hell. "What did he do?" "He threatened her and Lucas. He said the people close to you die. He said she should disappear, if she does not want the boy to pay the price." Vincent lunged for the desk and swept everything to the floor in a surge of rage. Papers flew. A glass shattered. He did not care. He stood there, breathing hard, his whole body shaking with fury. His father, the man he had honored his entire life, the man who taught him how to build an empire, how to rule with strength and fear, the man Vincent had always believed stepped aside to rest after handing power to him. It had all been a lie. Antonio had been working with his enemy. Antonio had been protecting a drug dealer. Antonio had indirectly destroyed the life of the woman Vincent cared about, and now Antonio was threatening Sarah and Lucas. Vincent drew in a deep breath, forcing the fire in his chest down, trying to keep it from exploding. He knew what he had to do. He knew it would be the hardest decision of his life. But when he thought of Sarah's pale eyes and Lucas's clear, bright smile, he knew he had no choice. "Get the car ready," he said, his voice cold as ice. "I need to see my father." That afternoon, Sarah went to the small office at the restaurant to finish the end-of-month report. Lucas was at home with the babysitter Vincent had hired to help her, a gentle, middle-aged woman named Martha. Everything felt normal, until Sarah heard voices coming from the room next door. Daniel's voice, low and clear, carried through the thin wall. "Boss, I confirmed it again. Antonio is the one protecting Hayes. He has been working with Caruso for 5 years. Framing Sarah Mitchell was part of his plan to silence a witness. Sarah froze. The stack of papers in her hands began to shake violently. She pressed her ear to the wall, heart pounding out of control, forcing herself to listen. Sarah was fired, lost her license. Her husband abandoned her, and she ended up living in a car with a child who has a heart condition, all because she accidentally saw Hayes' stash. And Antonio is the one behind it all. The papers slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor. The soft sound was so small no one heard it. Sarah stepped back. Her spine hit the wall. Her whole body trembled like a leaf in a storm. Antonio Romano, Vincent's father, the man who threatened her yesterday, was the very man who had destroyed her life 6 years ago. She could not breathe. The air felt thick, heavy, squeezing her throat shut. 6 years. 6 years in hell. Branded a criminal. Thrown away by her husband. Turned on by the world. 6 years of raising her child in poverty. Watching Lucas suffer through his heart condition while she did not have enough money to fix what was broken. All because a man she had never even met decided her life was worth less than his drug pipeline. And that man was Vincent's father. Vincent, the man who saved her son. The man who sat beside her through endless hospital nights. The man who shared with her the pain of losing a child, losing a wife. The man she had begun to trust. The man she had begun to open her heart to. The son of the man who ruined her. Fate was cruel. So cruel it felt like a joke. So cruel it hurt in a way she could not bear. Sarah quietly gathered her things and slipped out through the back door of the office without anyone seeing her. She walked like a sleepwalker through the familiar streets. She made it back to the apartment Vincent had given her. The place was warm, clean, filled with things she had never dared to dream of. And now it all felt like mockery. Martha looked surprised when she saw Sarah home early, but Sarah only said she was not feeling well and needed to rest. When Martha left, Sarah shut the door. She sank down onto the floor, and she cried. She cried for 6 years of injustice. She cried for the long nights going hungry so her son could eat. She cried for the times she watched Lucas in pain and could do nothing. And she cried because for the first time in so many years, she thought she had finally found a place to lean on, only to learn that place had been built on top of her suffering. Night fell. Lucas was sleeping deeply. Sarah stood in the doorway of his room, her eyes blurred with tears. He lay curled under a warm blanket, one arm wrapped around the stuffed bear from Emma's bookshelf. His face looked peaceful, like an angel. She could not stay here anymore. She could not look at Vincent without thinking of Antonio. She could not live in this apartment without thinking it was paid for with the money of the family that destroyed her life. She could not keep accepting help from the son of her enemy without feeling like she was betraying herself. Sarah took out paper and pen. She sat at the table, and she wrote, "Vincent, I know the truth now. Your father is the one behind what happened to me 6 years ago. He destroyed my life to protect his drug operation. I know you are not to blame for any of this. I know you did not know. But I cannot stay beside the family that took everything from me. I am sorry. Thank you for everything you have done for Lucas and me. I will never forget." She folded the note and set it on the table beside the vase of flowers Lucas had picked in the park. Then she went into her son's room and gently woke him. "Lucas, wake up. We have to go." Lucas rubbed his eyes, half asleep. "Where are we going, Mom?" "It is nighttime. We are going to find a new home, sweetheart. I will explain later." He did not understand, but he obediently let her put his coat on. When they stepped out the door, Lucas looked back at the warm apartment, then asked, his voice sad, "What about the sad flower man?" "Mom, he will be so sad if we leave without telling him." Sarah bit down hard on her lip, holding back tears. "He will understand, sweetheart." She took her son's hand and walked into the dark, leaving behind the warm apartment, Emma's bookshelf, the picture of the black-clothed angel, and everything she had once believed might finally be home. She did not know where they would go. She only knew she could not stay. The next morning, Vincent came to Sarah's apartment as usual. He brought a box of pastries Lucas liked, and a new comic book. But when he knocked, no one answered. He knocked again, then again, and his heart began to beat faster. Chased by a bad feeling he could not shake, he used the spare key to open the door, and the apartment greeted him with emptiness. No Sarah, no Lucas, no clear, bright laughter from the boy, no small feet running through the rooms, only a frightening silence, and the fading scent of a scented candle still lingering in the air. Vincent stepped inside, his eyes sweeping every corner. Lucas's bed was still neatly made. The closet was half empty, and on the table beside the wilted vase of flowers, there was a folded note. He picked it up. His hand trembled slightly as he opened it and read, "Vincent, I know the truth now. Your father is the one behind what happened to me 6 years ago. He destroyed my life to protect his drug operation. I know you are not to blame for any of this. I know you did not know, but I cannot stay beside the family that took everything from me. I am sorry. Thank you for everything you have done for Lucas and me. I will never forget." The note slipped from his fingers and drifted down to the floor. Vincent stood there, staring into empty space, and for the first time in years, he felt the ground beneath him collapse. She knows. She knows the truth about Antonio. She knows his father is the one who destroyed her life. And she left. Vincent dropped to his knees and picked up the note again, reading it over and over, as if he could find something else hidden between the lines. But nothing changed. Sarah was gone. Lucas was gone. And once again, he had lost the people he cared about. For the next 3 days, Vincent was like a madman. He had his men search all over Chicago. They checked every boarding house, every hotel, every place a single mother with a small child might hide. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He only sat in his office, waiting for reports from his people. Daniel watched his boss with worry, but he did not dare speak. In 10 years of following Vincent, he had never seen him like this. Broken, desperate, in pain so raw he could not hide it. On the 4th day, with still no word of Sarah and Lucas, Vincent stood up, pulled on his coat, and ordered Daniel, "Take me to see my father." Daniel wanted to stop him, but when he saw Vincent's eyes, he knew there was nothing that could stand in his way now. Antonio's mansion sat in the outskirts of Chicago, an old estate with Italian architecture, surrounded by high fences and strict security. But no one dared stop Vincent when he walked in. His gray eyes were ice cold. His steps were heavy with killing intent. Antonio was sitting in his office, a glass of red wine in his hand, his expression calm, as if he had been waiting for this meeting. "My son," he said evenly, "I suppose you know now." "Why?" Vincent asked, his voice rumbling up from deep in his chest. "Why did you do it?" Antonio set the wine glass down and looked at his son with cold eyes, without a trace of regret. "Business. Hayes was a profitable pipeline, and that nurse girl was only collateral damage. She saw what she was not meant to see, and she had to disappear. I gave her a chance to live, instead of killing her the way I should have." Vincent stepped forward, his hand tightening into a fist. "You call that giving her a chance to live? You destroyed her life. You made her lose her job, lose her home, lose her husband. You forced her to live in a car with a child who has a heart condition for years. You made an innocent woman lose everything just because you wanted to protect your filthy drug operation." Antonio stood. His cane struck the floor, the sound echoing in the room. "In our world, no one is innocent, Vincent. That was the first lesson I taught you. How did you forget?" "I did not forget," Vincent said, his voice hard as steel. "But I learned another lesson you never taught me. There are lines you do not cross. There are people you do not touch. And there are sins that cannot be forgiven." He moved close until he was standing right in front of Antonio. His gray eyes burned. "From today on, you are no longer my father. You are not allowed to step onto my territory. You are not allowed to lay a hand on anyone I care about. If I see you anywhere near Sarah or Lucas again, I will forget you ever brought me into this world." Antonio stared at his son. Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. Perhaps shock, perhaps disappointment, perhaps a grudging sliver of respect. "You will regret this decision, Vincent." "No." Vincent turned away, walking toward the door. "The only thing I regret is not knowing the truth sooner." The door slammed shut behind him. Vincent walked out, leaving Antonio alone in the dark room with a glass of wine that had gone cold. 1 week after the confrontation with Antonio, Vincent did something no one expected. He held a press conference at the largest hotel in Chicago, inviting every news agency, every television station, and even the city's most famous investigative reporters. The news spread like wildfire. Vincent Romano, the shadowy kingpin everyone knew about but no one dared to speak of, was going to appear in public before the media. Daniel stood beside his boss in the waiting room, his face tight with worry. "Boss, are you sure you want to do this? Once you step out there, there is no way back." Vincent looked at himself in the mirror. A simple gray suit, no tie, the faint scar on his neck visible under the lights. He was no longer going to be a ghost in the underworld. He would step into the light, even if that light might burn him alive. "I know," he answered, calm as still water. "That is why I have to do it." When Vincent stepped up to the podium, the entire room fell silent. Hundreds of eyes fixed on him. Cameras flashed without mercy. Microphones pointed straight at his face. For the first time in his life, Vincent Romano stood before the public not as a rumor, not as a phantom, but as a man of flesh and bone. He did not begin with greetings or polite small talk. He simply stood there, looking directly into the camera lens, and he spoke. 6 years ago, A nurse named Sarah Mitchell was framed for stealing pain medication at St. Mary's Hospital. She was fired. Her nursing license was revoked. Her husband abandoned her, and she was forced to live in a car with her little son, who was born with a congenital heart condition. For 6 years, society treated her like a criminal. No one believed her words. No one stood on her side. He paused, drawing in a deep breath. Today, I am standing here to tell the truth. Sarah Mitchell did not steal those drugs. She was framed to silence her, because she accidentally discovered an illegal drug operation led by Dr. Richard Hayes. A restless murmur rolled through the room. Vincent lifted a hand, signaling for silence, and continued. I have complete evidence of Hayes's drug trafficking, including transaction records, a customer list, and statements from people involved. All of it has been sent to the authorities and will be released publicly immediately after this press conference. A reporter raised a hand. Mr. Romano, where did you get this evidence? And why do you care about the case of an ordinary nurse? Vincent looked straight into the reporter's eyes, without flinching. Because Sarah Mitchell is not a stranger to me, and because Hayes's operation was protected by someone in my own family. The room went dead still. No one dared to breathe too loudly. My father, Antonio Romano, was behind this pipeline. He worked with the Caruso gang to protect Hayes, and framing Sarah Mitchell was part of his plan. The murmur exploded like a tidal wave. Reporters stood up. Cameras flashed like lightning. Questions were shouted from every direction. But Vincent did not move. He waited until the noise thinned. Then he spoke again. I am not standing here to apologize on my father's behalf. I do not have that right. I am standing here to announce the truth, to return honor to a woman who has lived under false shame for 6 years, and to let the world know that there are crimes that cannot be hidden forever. He paused, his voice dropping lower. Starting today, I am cutting all ties with Antonio Romano. I am taking full control of the Romano group to dismantle the corruption he built, and he no longer has my protection. He is no longer part of the organization I run, and he no longer has my protection. Vincent glanced down at the papers in his hand, then looked up again. Finally, I want to announce the creation of the Emma and Sarah Foundation. This foundation will support single mothers raising children with life-threatening illnesses, especially those who have been abandoned by the system and have no one to help them. The foundation is named after my daughter, Emma Romano, who died from heart disease 3 years ago, and Sarah Mitchell, the bravest woman I have ever met. Vincent stepped down from the podium and did not answer another question. Behind him, the room erupted in chaos, but he did not turn back. The next day, the story flooded every newspaper. Dr. Richard Hayes was arrested right at the hospital, and Antonio Romano vanished from Chicago, no one knowing where he went. Half of Vincent's men, the ones loyal to Antonio, left the organization. Some even threatened revenge. Daniel stood in Vincent's office, his expression drawn tight with fear. Boss, we have lost nearly half our force. Caruso will take advantage of this and attack. Are you sure this was the right decision? Vincent sat behind his desk, holding the drawing of the black-clothed angel Lucas had given him. He stared at it for a long time, as if the paper could speak. Then he answered, softly, but with certainty. I lost my wife because I was too busy chasing money. I lost my child because I was not there when she needed me. I lived like a corpse for 3 years, believing money and power were all I had left. But Sarah and Lucas showed me there are things that matter more than that. He set the drawing down on the desk and looked out the window, where the sky was slowly turning bright. Losing half the organization does not matter. What matters is that this time, I did the right thing. The cheap motel room on the outskirts of Chicago was cramped and damp, with water stains spreading across the walls and an old bed that squeaked every time someone shifted. Sarah had rented the room with the little money left in her wallet, enough for about 1 week if she stretched every dollar. After that, she did not know where they would go. Lucas sat on the bed, scribbling drawings on a small piece of paper she had asked for at the front desk. He did not ask much about why they had to leave the warm apartment, why they were sleeping in this strange place. He just stayed quiet and followed his mother, as if he had grown too used to life-changing without warning. Sarah sat on a worn wooden chair, eyes fixed on the small television playing the evening news. She was not truly watching. She only wanted the noise to fill the frightening silence in the room. Then she heard a name, and she shot to her feet. Vincent Romano, the mysterious kingpin of Chicago's underworld, appeared publicly at a shocking press conference yesterday. Sarah moved closer to the television, her heart pounding out of control. On the screen, Vincent stood behind a podium, his face severe, but his eyes steady with determination. 6 years ago, a nurse named Sarah Mitchell was framed for stealing pain medication at St. Mary's Hospital. Sarah stood frozen, her ears ringing, hearing only Vincent's words echoing through the small room. She was treated by society like a criminal. No one believed her. No one stood with her. Tears began to slide down Sarah's cheeks, but she did not bother wiping them away. Sarah Mitchell did not steal those drugs. She was framed to silence her. Sarah sank to the floor, one hand covering her mouth to keep the sob from breaking free. 6 years. 6 years of carrying that shame, of being turned away by the world, of being seen as a thief. And now, in front of millions of people, Vincent was saying the truth she had tried to prove for so long, the truth no one had wanted to hear. My father, Antonio Romano, was behind this pipeline. Sarah was so shocked she stopped crying. Vincent was accusing his own father in public. He was tearing apart his family, tearing apart his empire, to protect her. The Emma and Sarah Foundation will support single mothers raising children with life-threatening illnesses. When she heard her name spoken beside Emma's, she cried out loud, not from pain, but because for the first time in her life, she felt someone valued her that deeply. Lucas stopped drawing. He climbed down from the bed and walked over to his mother. He did not understand why she was crying, but he sat down beside her anyway, lifting his small hand to wipe the tears from her face. Mom, do not cry. When you cry, I feel so sad. Sarah pulled him into her arms and kissed his soft hair. I am okay, sweetheart. I just miss someone. Lucas looked up at her. His big round eyes lit up. Do you miss the sad flower man, Mom? I miss him too. Are we going home now? Sarah looked at her son, her heart twisting. Home, sweetheart. Where is home? Lucas tilted his head, as if he were thinking about something very important. Then he answered, his voice simple, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Wherever Mr. Vincent is, that is home, Mom. Sarah looked at her boy. Then she looked back at the television screen, where the press conference had already ended. She remembered Vincent sitting beside her in the hospital hallway. The 8 hours he waited outside the operating room. The first dinner, when Lucas fell asleep with his head in Vincent's lap. The night on the balcony, when he spoke of Emma and Grace. She had run because she believed she could not stand beside the family that had ruined her life. But Vincent was not Antonio. Vincent had chosen her over his father. Vincent had stood in front of the whole world to protect her. Sarah rose to her feet. She wiped her tears away, and she began gathering the few belongings they had. Come on, sweetheart. We are going home. Sarah called Daniel. It was the only way she could reach Vincent without knowing where he was. Daniel picked up immediately, his voice full of surprise when he recognized the caller. Miss Mitchell, where are you? The boss has been looking for you all week. I know, Sarah answered, her voice thick with emotion. Where is he? Daniel was quiet for a moment, as if weighing whether he should say it. Then he let out a slow sigh. Rose Hill Cemetery. He goes there when he needs to think alone. Sarah thanked Daniel and hung up. She took Lucas to a small flower shop on the corner, bought a bouquet of pure white flowers, then called a taxi to the cemetery. Rose Hill Cemetery was one of the largest and oldest cemeteries in Chicago, with tall trees rising over gentle hills and old graves scattered across the slopes. Sarah walked along the stone path, her hand gripping Lucas's, her eyes searching for a familiar figure among thousands of headstones. Then she saw him. Vincent was sitting on the grass in front of a small white marble grave. His back was bent. His head hung low. He was not wearing a suit the way he usually did, only a wrinkled light gray shirt and black trousers. He looked older, more exhausted, and lonelier than she had ever seen him. Sarah stopped a few steps away, not wanting to disturb his private moment. But Lucas had already spotted Vincent, and the boy cried out with pure joy. Sad flower man. Vincent turned. His gray eyes widened when he saw them. He sprang to his feet, as if he could not trust what he was seeing. Sarah. Lucas. Lucas let go of his mother's hand and ran to Vincent, wrapping his arms around Vincent's leg as if afraid he might disappear. I missed you so much. My mom missed you too. Why did you not come find me? Vincent dropped to his knees and pulled the boy into his arms. His gray eyes shimmered. I missed you too. I searched everywhere for you. Sarah watched from a distance as Vincent held her son, and her heart melted in her chest. She walked closer and stopped before the grave Vincent had been sitting beside. The headstone read, Emma Grace Romano, beloved daughter of her mother and father, 6 years old. Our little angel has gone to heaven. Sarah knelt down and placed the white flowers on Emma's grave. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering the words she had been carrying all the way here. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for letting your father sit down beside my little family that night. Without you, I do not know where we would be now. She opened her eyes and gently traced her fingers across the cold stone. I promise I will take care of your father. I will not let him be alone anymore. Behind her, Vincent stood with Lucas in his arms, listening to every word in silence. When Sarah rose and turned, she saw Vincent's eyes were red. You came back, he said softly, his voice cracking. I am sorry I left, Sarah said. tears sliding down her cheeks. I was afraid. I thought I could not stay beside the family that destroyed my life. But then I realized you are not your father. You chose me. You stood in front of the whole world to protect me, even though it meant betraying your own family. Vincent stepped closer and set Lucas down on the grass. I do not need your apology. I only need to know you are safe. Sarah looked at him, then at Emma's grave, then at Lucas standing between them with a bright smile. Lucas told me that wherever you are, that is home, she said gently. And I think he is right. Vincent lifted his hand and wiped the tears from her cheek. Then come home. Sarah nodded. And then she did something she never expected herself to do. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Vincent, resting her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat strong and warm beneath her ear. Vincent froze for a moment, as if he was not used to being held. Then, slowly, he lifted his arms and held her, tightening his embrace as if afraid she would disappear again. Lucas stood beside them, watching his mother hug the sad flower man, and he smiled. Emma, he whispered to the small grave, thank you for sending Dad to me. The afternoon wind moved through the cemetery, stirring the white flowers on Emma's grave, as if the little girl were sending her greeting to her new family. 3 months passed like a dream Sarah could hardly believe was real. After Vincent's press conference, her name was cleared across every news outlet. St. Mary's Hospital sent an official letter of apology and offered her job back, but Sarah refused. She did not want to return to the place that treated her like a criminal, the place that did not believe her when she needed them most. Instead, she applied to Chicago Children's Hospital, the hospital Vincent had been quietly funding for 3 years. With her credentials restored, and with a recommendation from the Emma and Sarah Foundation, she was hired immediately. For the first time in 6 years, Sarah put on the pale blue nurse's uniform again. For the first time in 6 years, she clipped on her name badge, polished and bright. Sarah Mitchell, registered nurse. She worked in pediatric cardiology, caring for children with heart conditions like the one Lucas once had. Every day she looked at little ones with bluish lips and tired eyes, and she saw her own son in them. She cared for them with every ounce of love and devotion she had, as if each child were her Lucas. Lucas was completely healthy now. The doctors said his heart was functioning normally, and if he continued with a sensible diet and regular exercise, he could live a healthy life like any other child. He started kindergarten at a good school near their new apartment, where Sarah and Lucas moved after everything settled down. Not the old apartment Vincent had given them, a smaller one, more modest, a place Sarah paid for herself, with the salary she earned with her own hands. She did not want to owe Vincent anymore. She wanted to stand on her own feet, rebuild her life through her own strength. Vincent understood, and he did not argue, but he still visited, not whenever he wanted, only when he was invited. Every Friday night, Vincent came to the small apartment for dinner with the two of them. He brought wine for Sarah, a new toy for Lucas, and sometimes storybooks he found in old bookstores. Lucas always ran to the door to greet him with a shout of joy, while Sarah stood in the kitchen, smiling quietly as she watched her son throw his arms around the man he called the sad flower man. On weekends, Vincent took them to the park, to the movies, for ice cream. He was not naturally good at playing with children, but he tried. He sat and watched Lucas ride his bike. He clapped when the boy made it through a difficult stretch. He pulled him close when Lucas fell and cried. In each small moment, Sarah saw Vincent's gray eyes soften a little more. She saw the wound inside him slowly begin to heal. They did not rush. They did not make promises. They did not name what they were becoming. They were simply 3 people life had once knocked down, learning how to stand up again, together, and keep walking. Sarah began writing a journal for Lucas. She wrote about their journey, from nights sleeping in a freezing car to the warm apartment they had now. She wrote about the man who bought flowers with sad eyes, about how he sat down beside them in the snowy night instead of walking away. She wrote so that one day, when Lucas was older, he would understand what kind of gift life had placed in their hands. And every night, before he went to sleep, Lucas looked up at the drawing of the black-clothed angel he had made, the one Vincent still kept the original of in the inside pocket of his suit jacket, and he whispered, "Good night, sad flower man. I love you." Sarah stood outside her son's door, listening, and she smiled. No one had said it out loud yet, but they were already a family. Spring arrived in Chicago on warm winds and gentle golden light filtering through new leaves. The park near Sarah's apartment overflowed with the fresh green of new grass and the soft pink of cherry blossoms in bloom. Birdsong fluttered from branch to branch. Children's laughter echoed everywhere, and the air itself seemed filled with joy and hope. That afternoon, Sarah, Vincent, and Lucas went to the park the way they did every weekend. Lucas ran across the grass, chasing bright butterflies. Sarah and Vincent sat on a stone bench beneath a maple tree, quietly watching him. 6 months ago, that child had been barely hanging on in a hospital bed, his lips tinted blue, his breathing thin and weak. Now he was running under the spring sun, cheeks rosy, clear laughter ringing through the park. Vincent watched Lucas, and his gray eyes softened in a way Sarah had never seen before. The scar inside him was still there, but it was no longer bleeding. Emma would always be a part of him. Yet now he had learned how to keep living without letting the past drown him. Lucas ran back to them, sweat beading on his forehead, a bright smile on his mouth. He dropped down between Sarah and Vincent, panting from all the running. "Mom, I am thirsty." Sarah handed him a bottle of water and smoothed the sweat-damp hair from his forehead. Lucas took a long drink, then set the bottle down. He looked up at Vincent with an unusual seriousness. "Sad flower man, what is it?" Vincent turned to him. Lucas was quiet for a moment, as if thinking about something very important. Then he asked, his voice small but clear, "If you are my dad, can I call you Dad?" Sarah stopped breathing. She looked at her son, then at Vincent, not knowing what to say. Vincent froze too, gray eyes widening. He looked at Lucas, at those clear eyes lifted up to him, waiting, and something inside his chest broke open. Slowly, Vincent knelt down until he was at the boy's eye level. His eyes shimmered, and he did not try to hide it. "You want to call me Dad?" he asked, his voice rough. Lucas nodded, his big round eyes never leaving Vincent's. "Yes, because you love me the way a dad loves a child. You take care of my mom the way a dad takes care of a mom. You read stories to me. You take me out. You hold me when I fall. I think you are already my dad. I just have not been allowed to call you yet." Vincent could not find words. He only looked at the child, at that innocent face full of trust, and felt his heart being repaired piece by piece. "You can call me anything you want," he whispered, his voice trembling. "But being called Dad would be the greatest honor of my life." Lucas gave a joyful shout and threw his arms around Vincent's neck. He held on tight, those tiny arms locked around Vincent as if afraid he might disappear. "I love you, Dad," he whispered into Vincent's ear. "Emma chose you for me, right? She is in heaven looking down, and she saw I did not have a dad, so she sent you to me." Vincent held the boy close. Quiet tears slipped down his cheeks. He had lost Emma, lost Grace, lost everything he had ever loved. But now he had found a new family, a reason to keep living, a reason to keep loving. Sarah sat beside them, tears streaming down her face, yet her lips were smiling. She watched her son hold Vincent. She watched the man who had once been cold as ice weep in the arms of a 5-year-old child, and she knew this was the happiness she had searched for her whole life. Vincent lifted his head. One arm still held Lucas. With the other, he reached for Sarah. She placed her hand in his, and he pulled her into his embrace, holding both mother and son. They sat there beneath the budding maple, in a park flooded with spring sunlight. 3 people who life had once knocked down now held one another as if they would never let go. "Thank you," he whispered into Sarah's ear. "Thank you for giving me a reason to stay." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes wet, her face shining with happiness. "Thank you for sitting down," she answered. "That night, when the whole world walked away, you were the only one who chose to sit down beside my little family." Lucas lifted his head from Vincent's arms and smiled the brightest smile of all. "Now we are a family, right? Dad, Mom, and me, like in a fairy tale." Vincent looked at the boy, then at Sarah, then up at the blue sky, where he believed Emma was smiling down. "Yes, my son, like in a fairy tale. Sometimes, the devil does not have horns. He wears a black suit and carries a broken heart. And sometimes, the ones the world calls devils are the only ones who choose to sit down when the whole world walks away." The story of Sarah, Vincent, and Lucas reminds us that life is never completely dark, that after long nights of suffering, dawn is always waiting, and that love can heal every wound, if we are brave enough to open our hearts. The most precious lesson from this story is this: never judge anyone by appearances. Never give up hope no matter how harsh life becomes, and always be willing to sit down beside those in need, because sometimes one small act can change an entire life. If this story touched your heart, please press the subscribe button on our channel, tap like, and share this video with your loved ones so we can spread these good values together. We would truly love to know how you feel about this story. Have you ever met someone who chose to sit down beside you when the whole world walked away? Do you believe love can heal every wound? Please leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. We are listening, and we truly want to hear your story. We wish everyone watching this video strong health and a life that is joyful and peaceful each day. Thank you for being here with us. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next videos.